Okay, hey guys, we're back with episode 3 of our LCS preview. I'm going to be speeding these up, so I'm probably going to be recording these all in one day if I can. So I might be wearing the same clothes, and it might all be the same here because we are kind of cutting it real close with LCS starting here in about a week. So let's get to it with NRG. So NRG is... There's CLG. CLG sold their spot. Not really sold their spot, but just got bought out by NRG, so NRG basically found their way back into the LCS. And initially going into the offseason, NRG made it clear that they were not going to make any changes, and then they decided to make 2 changes, so that's kind of weird. But let's sort of just unpack those 2 changes that they made. So firstly, they got rid of Luger, and they replaced him with FBI, and then they got rid of Poom and replaced him with Ignar. So let's start with the Luger to FBI change. So Luger was like a solid ADC in the sense that he didn't necessarily have the strong side him. He could perform in farm up, and he did pretty well with the kind of, heavy hyper carry Siversary meta. He did sort of falter a little bit compared to Summer 22 and Spring 23, but he still was pretty decent. I'd say he was, him and Doublelift were probably at neck and neck with being, 5th-ish, 5th, 6th best AD carry, just middle of the pack, alright. And FBI was slightly above, despite the somewhat poor finish from EG last split. FBI had a pretty consistent performance with EG throughout the split, and he's still a pretty good player. I would argue that FBI is a slight upgrade, not like a crazy big upgrade for NRG, but it's a good move at the very least, although it is still disappointing to see this team that is, it was sort of fun to watch as this team that had just been kind of together the entire time and hadn't really been broken up in a bit, kind of just get broken up suddenly. So it's kind of sad that Luger is going to be teamless because he is really good, and the fact that he's teamless is kind of criminal in my opinion. But speaking of criminal, let's move to the next thing that I think is criminal, and that's replacing Poom with Ignar. Ignar was, I would argue, bottom 3 supports last split. He didn't play a lot, but when he did play, he just didn't make any crazy good performances. He was very aggressive, but it just is not, he does not inspire a lot of confidence, especially if you compare it to the supports we're gonna have and the top of the line, and this just doesn't really inspire much compared to Poom, who was like Luger, very consistent, and it was like an okay bot lane. Luger and FBI and Ignar just feels kind of random, like they just slapped together 2 people that they could find instead of just keeping, this bot lane together. But I mean, it is what it is. There's not much to say about this. NRG is taking a hit here because I think that you also have to account for loss of team cohesion because they have to kind of get used to, a new AD carry with FBI and Ignar. But the top side is still strong enough. I think that maybe NRG will have some benefit with Dokla because Dokla is pretty decent at carries, and carries are going to probably be in the meta, but I just feel like this team is going to be kind of eh. I don't think that they have much of a wow factor here. Dokla and Ignar, in my opinion, are probably who we watch out for going into this split. Did I say? I don't even know what I just said. Dokla and FBI. If I said something else, that's not what I meant. Dokla and FBI are who we should be looking out for on this team. But if they don't perform, then this team's going to look really bad, because the meta is not really serving towards anybody else. But for that reason, for the reasons above or rather the reasons I just stated, again, I don't script these, so these sound, kind of panicky. I would probably say that for everything I just described, I think NRG will probably be depending on how they do, I would say between 5th and 7th place. I know they're going to make playoffs. They're not going to scrape playoffs, but they're going to make it. It's just going to be a really uninspiring team. They could show up, but it's just kind of hard to tell. I think really it comes down to whether Dokla and FBI can carry, and if Ignar can, facilitate FBI enough, both in and out of lane. But I just think that this is a weird off-season, especially for CLG, who is now NRG. It just is weird. I don't really understand this. But with that in mind, let's move on to the team with the biggest off-season, Evil Geniuses. Alright, so EG is next. If you may have noticed during the NRG example, or at the NRG, god damn, I really suck at saying these things. I'm just kind of saying it. I'm not scripting this shit. Next time around, I will. Lesson learned. But as you might have noticed with NRG, when I was explaining it, you probably saw the tabs above. If you didn't, it's not a bad thing. Keeps a surprise, sort of. But if you did notice, you notice at least 2 changes coming into Evil Geniuses, but there are a total of 4. They have basically completely wiped the team with the exception of JoJo and replaced everybody. And so we will take each of these changes one by one, and I'll tell you how I feel about them. And then actually at the end, what I'll do is I will rank the changes from worst change to best change. So starting off with the top lane, they're replacing Someday with Revenge. So I don't have very much to say about this. I mean, this is just an obvious downgrade. Revenge is good. He definitely was in Elo Hell with Immortals, but I think that Someday is still a better top laner. I think Revenge, even if he was on a good team, he would probably be like 6th or 7th best top laner in the LCS. He's just not like good compared to the other ones. Although the meta will serve towards Revenge, most certainly, I don't really know if this is still a good change, just because Revenge doesn't seem to be the best at tanks, and if the Bruiser meta doesn't end up panning out, or the carry top meta doesn't kind of pan out the way we think it does, then Revenge is in a lot of trouble. But yeah, this is just, I mean, I understand why they made this change. They couldn't keep this roster together. So they just bought out people, and so Revenge was a very easy choice for them. Revenge isn't the worst downgrade. They could have picked somebody like Armut or Solo. Revenge is definitely not the worst downgrade, but it is still nonetheless a downgrade. But next is the jungle. So they got rid of Inspired because they couldn't keep him, and they replaced him with Armeo. So if we go to this page here, looking at Armeo's stats, we're gonna sort of like at 2 separate seasons, his most recent split in the LCS, and then his most recent split with like a challenger team or like a challenger leagues team or proving grounds. So if we look at the LCS in summer of 2021, you can see that Team Liquid didn't have the best record. They did okay, but if you look at his general stats, you can see that he just couldn't really play early game that well. His aggression is kind of low. He's mostly like a engage focused jungler. He's pretty good at like stuff like, Sejuani or Nocturne. So it's just like within LCS, the last time he was there, he didn't have a very good performance. So it can be a little bit scary, but if we go to the proving grounds, we can see that he had a much better time on the proving grounds. Once again, he still has the strength on these sort of like engage focused junglers. His stats are a bit better here. I would argue that he has a little bit of improvement. His damage is a bit lower, but he still has a lot of first blood participation. He's just a more team-focused, team-oriented jungler. And so I think that Armeo, although Inspired, was definitely a better jungler than Armeo. Armeo is not the worst downgrade. I would say that this is like, Armeo's fixing to maybe be like, maybe top 5, top 6 junglers in LCS to split. Which is, again, like, not the worst downgrade, although I still think that it's criminal for Inspired to be teamless. But it is what it is. Yeah, next we have the AD carry. So they got rid of FBI. FBI went to NRG, obviously, and then they brought up Unforgiven from the 100 Thieves Challenger team. Unforgiven was on Mad Lions last year as their AD carry. He had a pretty good performance. He's one of the better AD carries in EU last year, known for his Draven, and he is now back on a main roster with EG. And I think that this is a huge upgrade. Unforgiven is pretty insane. I don't really like Unforgiven as a person, but I do respect him as a player. I think he's really, really good. As you can see here, he's just absolutely smurfing in Challenger League. He just has like insane amounts of like CS difference. He's always ahead in CS. A lot of gold difference, a lot of XP difference. He's always like, he's even got a pentakill. He has a very large share of damage. He's just like a very aggressive and like consistently good AD carry, and I would argue that that is a good reason to argue that he is an upgrade to FBI. Unforgiven is the focus of this team, and I think if you combine that with the fact that Armeo is a very team-focused jungler, you're setting up for a pretty good synergy between Armeo and Unforgiven. But then, speaking of synergies, let's move on to the other change. They replaced Vulcan with Ayla. Obviously, basically, EG and FlyQuest traded. Ayla went to EG, Vulcan went to FlyQuest. EG definitely lost out on this trade. They got rid of probably the best support in NA and got a sort of pretty big downgrade. Ayla had a pretty uninspiring split. Last split, he's kind of a scary pick, not very good at facilitating carries. As you notice with Prince, he kind of held Prince back, and so I think that if there's anything to really pay attention to this split, it's how Ayla plays around his team. If he can play a little bit better, this team is unstoppable. If Ayla is useless, then this team is useless. But once again, I think that if there were players to watch out for on this team as who would make the big difference, the honest to God answer is everyone. Everyone here could make a difference on this team. Can Armeo and Ayla facilitate Unforgiven? Can Jojo come back to form that he was like in spring last year? Is Revenge actually good? Was he in Elo hell, or is he actually just not good? Will Unforgiven still carry on like a very good smurfing, playstyle that he had in Challengers, or is he just, kind of, not, he's just in a much lower skill level than LCS. Point is, this team is pretty volatile in terms of results. It's pretty hard to pin where I think that this team will end up, but in the regular season, I think I can I can almost say with confidence that this team will probably place in the regular season 7th. Now, here's why. I have to explain this. So I think that if you're strictly looking at the regular season, 18 best of ones, I think that the first round robin will be really tough for EG because they're going to be getting used to playing on stage together, and so they might have a lot of falters, and that's going to put them in a really bad spot towards the first half of the split. However, I think that as this team gels, they actually could get really, really good. So they'll definitely climb back up into playoffs, but I don't think that they'll get much higher than maybe 6th or 7th. So what I'm going to say with like final standing is that this team, EG, in the regular season will be in between 6th or 7th. Nowhere else but that. They could show up. I mean, if you want to speak truly, like this team is volatile enough to be top 3 all the way to bottom 8, or not bottom 8, but like bottom 3. Like that's how large the range is. But I think that realistically, this team is going to be a lower seed in playoffs, but they're gonna make it. They're gonna show up during playoffs for sure, I feel like. But we'll get to that prediction once we get to summer playoffs, because right now we don't really have anything to go off of in terms of how this team operates together. But EG, I mean, we just have to see. I mean, it's kind of hard with this team. But it was a weird off season for them for sure. Okay. Alright, y'all, that's all for this video. I recorded this a bit later, just because the one I recorded earlier had some serious audio issues. That was really annoying because it kind of was cutting in and out of shitty mic and okay mic. Anyways, I'll be brief just because I want to get these out. If you liked it, like the video, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more of this stuff. Go back and watch the other 2 parts if you are interested in that. And if you agree with me or disagree with me, leave a comment talking about this stuff. Once again, I love talking about Pro League of Legends. And with all of that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.